Welcome back, everyone. This is the last episode in our mini summer series of Behind the Scenes with an Indie Author. And today, my guest host here is Laura Thomas. You may remember her from her own guest episode, as well as our Memoir Summit. And she was the developmental editor for my new release, Lonely Girl. So here we are. We are a week since release. It released on June 22nd. And most of this conversation is just going to be around what that's been like. So enjoy.
Yeah. Yay. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
This is like birthing a child. Maybe, I was going to say less painful, but a different kind of pain.
Yeah.
Ongoing. But it's an immense success. So congratulations. I first want to just ask what it's been like. It's almost been a week now that the book has been out in the world. How are you feeling since launching it and having that kind of like peak and then maybe whatever comes after that?
It's so interesting because launch day for me was so anticlimactic because real life. Yeah, I had a dentist appointment that morning, and then I had to drive 2.5 hours to Vail because my fiance had a post-op surgery meeting appointment, and then we had to drive back. I got home at like 7 o'clock at night. I know a lot of authors like obsess over like, what are my sales numbers the first day or whatever. But I had already seen that Amazon doesn't really update very quickly. So I didn't even look until this morning, honestly. So we're recording this, on Sunday. And so I got numbers for just the full week. But what was super cool and what I had talked to Julie about that I was most anticipating was starting to get that feedback from people who were reading the book. So by the 22nd, most of the pre-orders had arrived in people's mailboxes either on Monday or Tuesday. And so I had people who were like texting me that they were starting to read it. And just so many beautiful comments, even from like family who know portions of the stories, but maybe don't know the depth of the various aspects of it. My brother, I love what he had told me. He was like, absolutely keep writing. I loved this book. He was like, it was so engrossing and soul crushing for the first 60%. And I was like, oh my gosh, please put that review on Amazon. I need people to know that, like, it's not a light summer read, but it's a very rewarding read. It's got a happy ending. It all serves a purpose. I did feel the need to reassure one of my friends who I hadn't seen in a long time. As she was reading the book, she's like sending me expletives of like, oh, this person, because she knew some of them, but she didn't know the story. And so she was outraged for me. And I was like, just know I'm good now. Like, keep reading and just know that, like, as awful as that part is that you just finished reading and as, newly outraged as you are, because this is new information to you, like, I'm good.
Yeah. Different place now.
Yeah.
I'm curious, knowing that so much of this story is deeply personal, and as you said, even people who are intimately in your life didn't always know all of these details. Were you nervous or did you have anxiety around people like your brother or family members or friends reading aspects of your life that maybe they didn't know about?
Not by the time the book released, no. But, like, I've been working on for the past, basically for the 3.5 years that I've been writing it, like, I've been much more open about the stories that are in it. So I wasn't going to shock anyone in my family with any of the stories. Obviously there's some former coworkers, like the one who sent me a text that had already left the lab at the point where, things start to go south. And so that was new to her. That would be true of anyone from that job that reads it, although I don't know how many of them will. I haven't tried to push it in that direction.
Sure.
But yeah.
We'll get into that as well,
Yeah.
any other reactions you've had. But before that, have you had any people reaching out you don't know, any strangers who've read the book or been introduced to it or maybe know somebody that you know? Have you heard anything from them yet that's really stood out?
Not yet. So all of my pre-orders, all of the people who came to my local book launch are people that I've made connections with.
Yeah.
Some of them are a little bit like looser connections. Like I've had a couple of the people who attended the Memoir Summit have purchased the book, so that's cool. But we spent like all day like actively with these people, so I feel like we know them, more deeply
Yeah.
than just someone who listens to the podcast or reads the emails. So all the names I've recognized, I know. So I've not, at 1 week out since launch, I've not broken into the people I don't know. But I will say that I just got an order from someone local who I don't know and I have one mutual friend with. And so it's gonna start. There's a couple of book clubs locally that are gonna be doing the book, and of course I don't know all the members of those book clubs, so it'll happen. But so far in the pre-sale and in the launch, it's been people I've had one-on-one connections with. So all that to say, like, that's probably gonna be most people's focus for selling their books. Although I think this is a great time to put this caveat of, when there may be something to be said for not marketing to people who appear in the book. The one negative response I'd gotten was from someone who appears very briefly in the book, and I was very excited to share the story with them. So I had reached out to them and said, "Hey, the book's released. Do you want a copy?" And they were like, "Yeah, I'd love to support you." And then I got a very lengthy text. A few days after they received their log, and they are really, really, really unhappy with me. The way that they are interpreting the small snippet of where they're mentioned in the book is not at all how I intended for it to be received. But I get it. Like, if you see yourself in a book, like, you can't help but see yourself as, like, a big deal, a main character, or an important thing. But because you're not actually a main character, you don't get the same sort of main character or even supporting character treatment of, like, the writer explaining your motivations or context or background. I mean, it was, unfortunately, I used her name because I did not feel like I was putting her into any sort of negative light. But she's one of the few that, like, who I used their name and I didn't check with them. Hey, is it okay if I use your name? I should have just not used a name. I could have just not used a name because this character only appears once. So there's no need to put a name. Or you can just change them. Now, I'd gotten her text and then I got my brother's text. And so I was texting him about it. I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you liked it because I have someone else who's really upset." And he was like, "I did not interpret that section that way. I don't think that what you did was wrong. I assumed all the names were pseudonyms. So, it is what it is. And it's definitely a lesson learned as far as really evaluating whether you need to use someone's name, whether you can change someone's name." I naturally hesitated to change names because it's so hard to find a suitable name to replace because names have so much attached to them. That, like, I couldn't, I struggled with all the names I did change to, like, find a name that had a similar essence.
I agree with that. And I think that that's just such a good point that acknowledges how vulnerable it feels to be included in somebody's book, how vulnerable memoir is, but then how vulnerable I think that the people who are in our books probably feel seeing that. And that their reaction, like any reader, we can't control our reader reaction. We can't control, sorry, I've got a baby who's chiming in occasionally and shaking the table. We can't control how they might perceive themselves through our lens. And it's just something that I think all memoirists struggle with as they're writing. And it's good to know that that kind of deep dive and conversation will continue within yourself. And so it's a good thing to ask yourself as you're writing and going through the process and really combing through at a later editing stage is, do I need everybody I've included? Have I changed all the names, even if, maybe just for safety, not safety, but just to be safe, even if you don't think that somebody's being portrayed negatively.
Right.
And knowing that ultimately some people might be upset who are main characters as well. And am I willing to take that risk to tell this story? It's a very brave thing to be a memoirist and to try to walk these lines.
Yeah, I think in that moment, of course, all the ones that I am more concerned about, like, suddenly that wave of fear is like, oh, if this person's reacting to this degree, what's going to happen if they then tell so-and-so that probably doesn't know this book even exists, that, like, I've done this and I've written this book and they're in it, even with a pseudonym, like, this could really blow up, And it's always that fear that, like, there's real stakes to sharing your story. And also, those are not the people who this book is written for. And I think that that's what I kind of took from it is like, the book is not written for the people who appear in the book, right? It's absolutely not for them. It's for people who have gone through similar experiences. So I'm not really losing anything if in the future I don't market my book at all to anyone that appears within it, mentioned or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're getting like a first week of lots of highs, it sounds like.
Yeah.
A bit of a blow there as well, but you learned something from it. You might do memoir differently going forward because of it. And so even those lessons are painful, they can be really valuable as well. I saw you shared your brother's line as well, and I was so moved by it, so touched. So I'm glad that is pouring in. I don't know if you've done this, but I personally save screenshots of all the like positive messages I get about my book, and I save them in a folder called Love. And when I'm feeling a little low about myself as a writer, I go and I look at them and I remind myself, like, these are genuine reactions from people.
Oh, I love that.
Had a positive response to what I've written. So
I need to go that.
It might be a good thing to do.
Like a special folder. That's the thing. It's like I've screenshot them, but then they live amongst the other 15,000, photos on my phone. So yeah, a special folder would be really good.
It's useful. I would love to ask about your launch party. Launch party here locally.
Yes.
Tell me about how that felt to actually be in person with people who either have read some of your work or they're going to read this work and make that personal connection with them.
It was so cool. I mean, that was sort of the pinnacle, I think, of the relief. Like, I wasn't so focused on release day, obviously, but like the book launch, the local book launch was a big deal. I obviously, as part of my pre-sale campaign, I had people picking up books that had already purchased them. So I went into it knowing that I at least would have those people show up and picking up their book. But I did have a number of others who came. I think I sold 13 books, and then another 10-ish were picked up from like pre-orders. So for me, that felt very successful. For the 2-hour window, I had kind of a constant, steady stream of people rolling in, but not so overwhelming to where like there was ever a line. Like I got to have at least a couple of words with everyone that came. There were I was especially touched by my former library writing group, which is no longer active and hasn't been active for about 2 years now. But I'd reached out to a bunch of them by email, and of that library group, 5 of them came and showed up and bought a copy of the book. And it means so much because those were the first people I ever shared the rawest versions of the stories with. Like, we would literally have like a single word prompt, and I'd write, a section for that prompt, and then I'd share it. And some of those ended up in the book. And so that group is really special to me, and it meant so much to me that like they in particular showed up. And yeah, it was just I had a great time, like being able to really step into an O and that like put on that author hat, and be like, yeah, look, this is my book. Don't you want it? Look how pretty it is. And so many people were really excited to read it, and yeah, it was a really good turnout. I bought way more food than I needed. I think I could have not offered food at all, or I could have had like one kind of drink and like a tray of cookies, and that would have probably been like more than sufficient. I didn't know how many people to expect because I made it a public event, so like I didn't know, and so I bought so much food because I was paranoid. I have a cancer of like running out of food, right? I don't want to be hosting an event and not have enough. But I mean, people barely ate. Most of it was really drop-in. Like they came in, they bought their books, I signed it, they maybe stayed for a few minutes and then they left. So anyone who's doing a book launch, I mean, it's gonna be a lot like your just classic bookstore book signing where people are just coming in, purchasing, I mean, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And it wasn't like they could like sit and hang out. I didn't have time to just hang. I had the next person and the next person and the next person. So if you're trying to keep costs down, and certainly for me, for next time, I won't bother with food. No need to add that to your, your cost.
Is there any part of you that would love to do events in the future where you also read from it? I know for this book launch, you did want to have that feeling of like, people can come at any time. I want to connect with all of them. I don't want this to be a wedding where I don't talk to actually the people who are there. And I think that you really like leverage that opportunity to build connection, which is so great because it is a personal, deep story. Do you imagine different events going forwards where you might structure them a little differently?
Yeah, I'd love to do some readings at some local bookstores. I also did have my computer set up with the narration of the coffee on the window story, which is the story that is the reason for this imagery on the front cover of the spilled coffee. I had narrated that story for a podcast I was a guest on, and so I did have that for people to listen to if they wanted to hear a snippet of the book ahead of time. Uh, But yeah, it'd be great to do some readings. I do think that, especially when it's, strangers buying your book, like people that don't know you, I think when they get to hear a little bit of your writing, when they get to read a sample or hear some of it, then like that goes a long way to them feeling confident that that's a story that they want to purchase, that they want to read.
Totally. Oh, I love those reflections. Well, we've covered the first week and your book launch. Is anything else kind of lingering that you're learning right now or that you're experiencing and you're either really joyful to be experiencing, it's unexpected, or it's unexpected in a way of like, oh, I'd do something differently? You've mentioned a couple. Anything else come to mind?
I think for me, like the biggest takeaway, and I mean, who's to say that this is true for every book or maybe wouldn't be true with my next book, but the books I sold are the people that I know. So I put so much effort into going on podcasts and being a podcast guest, and to posting regularly onto social media, and to, just doing all this extra outreach. I mean, I had ARC readers. Some of them have reviewed it, but I haven't got any purchases, from those people posting to their Instagrams or anything like that yet. I don't know if that will come. Obviously, it can take a lot of repetition and exposure for someone to see something before they decide they're going to purchase it. But I also wonder if maybe that energy just doesn't need to be expended on the front end. And there's a little bit of just some natural organic growth you can allow to happen as people get the books, as they review it, as they post it, as they decide that their book club's going to read it, and just let the word more organically get out. I don't know. What was your experience with that? Did you find any of it to be similar for a while?
It's so interesting. I do find that the organic growth for me was how it went. And I wish I had set the expectation for that a little bit more so that I didn't expect so much from launch day. And a lot of authors talk about that feeling of putting so much into launch day. And then there's almost this emotional letdown afterwards because you expect this big fanfare and celebration. And you might get some of it, but the expectations are so dangerous in terms of playing with your feeling of whether or not this is worth it. Believe me, your book is worth it. Everything you put into is worth it. For me as well, I'd put, somebody chiming in, guest star. I put a lot into connecting with my personal network as well. And this was something I shared at the Memoir Summit, that I actually found that to be the most enriching experience. To have connected with people. Those are the people you'll hear back from. You don't hear back from a lot of readers.
Right.
Think about all the books you read and you never reach out to the author. There's something really special about hearing back from the people in your life, and they become some of your long-term supporters. And then they're the ones who continue spreading the word. And that's where the organic growth happened for me. Was a couple of my readers were psychologists. So they had a book in their office, and then they started recommending it to any of their clients who seemed to be inclined towards what I was writing about. And then that spread to those people, recommending it to them, or somebody read it and then they wanted to share it with a friend's child who was graduating from college, something like that. And then dabbling in like Amazon ads, which I did a little bit later. I got much more stranger exposure and sales, but it also, and those can be great. There's so many different strategies you can go after. But for me, there was always something that felt a little empty with that too, because I would never hear back from those people. Where people in my network I could connect with, I could ask them personally if they would be willing to write a review, and then that just helped increase your exposure. So I always think, don't count it as anything limiting to invest primarily in your network in the beginning, because they're the ones who are actually going to be the pavement pacers for you, and they're going to do a lot of the legwork in terms of your organic growth and just getting your exposure down.
I think that's great advice, and that's certainly what I saw reflected in my sales. Just for numbers, because I've included those as a part of this series, I had 62 pre-orders. Most of those were shipped, but a couple of those were picked up at the book launch. I had 13 additional purchases at the book launch. And now I'm putting the books on consignment in some of the local bookstores and everything. So and then I looked on the Amazon stuff this morning. I sold 1 print copy and 10 ebook copies there. So yeah, I mean, we're getting kind of close to that 100 mark, which is sort of like oh, it'd be great if in the first week with the book launch and everything else going down, if I hit 100. There were a couple of people that couldn't come to the book launch that I know planned to and were not able to, that will end up buying their books locally at the bookstore, and that's great too. So
Nice.
I don't think I was far off from that sort of like, oh, it'd be nice if, it wasn't an expectation. It wasn't even a solid goal, but, it's kind of an idea of like, I think I can, if the marketing goes the way that I think it will, I think I've got 100 people interested.
That's awesome. And I think that you did two things really well. One is to reach out, like treat it like a Kickstarter campaign where you have to kind of remind people every day. They will think to themselves one day, oh, I want to buy that person's book. And then they're not going to remember. So you're not, I know it always feels like, am I annoying them? Am I overdoing it by reaching out? They need the reminder. So don't be afraid to keep posting about it, keep reaching out. And then the other is to make those personal connections. Reach out to people one-on-one and say, hey, I did this. I'm really proud of it. I would be delighted if you would be interested in checking it out. And you'd be surprised by how many people feel really honored actually to hear from you in that capacity and then have a desire to follow through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up this final episode of this behind the scenes series. Now, I don't know exactly what the podcast is going to look like on August, but shoot me a message. You can do the whole send a message thing, or you can put a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know if you liked this series, if you want to see more things like this. I want to steer this podcast in a way that gives you what you're looking for. So thank you for being here with me. I'll be taking July off, quote unquote, as I work on the back end with some upcoming guests. But we won't have any live episodes again until August. But thank you for being here. This is the Inspired Writer Collective podcast. Congratulations. Thank you.